Welcome to the Oh Woman podcast, where we discuss, so many things about women's sexuality, bodies, thoughts, and lives. We'll talk about everything from our relationships, to our orgasms, to our children, and our ovaries. And we'll share outstanding experiences and ordinary ones. I'm Emma, and a big open welcome to you. Welcome to the show today. You're listening to episode 10 of the Oh Woman podcast. You are not the vibrator you choose. So we're going to talk a little bit today about vibrators and the history of vibrators. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about choosing vibrator that best suits you and not worrying about what it looks like or who would generally want to buy that sort of vibrator. Whatever works for you is the vibrator you should pick. So you are not the vibrator you choose. You are only using it as a means to an end, so no worries. So the history of the vibrator is such a hilarious, interesting history. It almost seems as though it's fiction. Someone made it up. It's better than fiction, but it's reality. It actually happened. So during the 19th century, women were considered to be suffering from what they called back then hysteria, which is actually, the word hysteria is from the Greek word for uterus. So they thought it had to do with frustrations of being a woman or issues with being a woman. So hysterical was a woman's word. Men weren't hysterical, which is really interesting. And they're not talking about, I guess, a PMS sort of situation. Although maybe hysteria made PMS worse. They were calling it hysteria, and some of the side effects they found, or women were reporting this to their doctors back in the 19th century. They were saying, I'm feeling really anxious and worried about stuff, and I'm feeling really sleepless. I wake up in the middle of the night, and I can't go to sleep, or I can't go to sleep in the first place. I'm also feeling nervous, stressed out, and I'm having erotic fantasies, which was apparently not something that was normal at the time, supposedly. Because during that time period, women weren't considered to have sexual desire at all. They were just believed to be the recipients of male sexual desire, and they didn't have any of their own to offer the partnership. Not only did women not have sexual desire, they also didn't really get any sexual pleasure. And so, of course, this hysteria that women were experiencing, that many of the doctors noticed, was not considered to be sexual frustration, because you can only be sexually frustrated if you have a sexual desire and if you actually enjoy sex on a certain level. So they didn't think of that at all for women. They thought, it's got to be due to other factors. Now, this is only this time period. If you go back further in time and you look at what doctors were telling women, they were prescribing dildos sometimes, or having more sex with their husbands, or whatever. Like, if you look at the 13th century, women were reporting symptoms such as these in some cases, and the doctor would say, okay, well, you need to use a dildo. So there wasn't such a fear of women having sexual desire during the earlier periods as there was beginning around the time when everyone started to get nervous about how proper it was for women to be sexual. So 13th century doctors were saying, okay, you can use a dildo. And later, 16th century doctors were saying, okay, well, then you should encourage your husband's lust, which really wasn't necessarily going to be that effective, because that would just mean there would be more sexual intercourse. And in the case of many women, sexual intercourse is not how orgasms happen. You have to have extra things happen. So there was definitely, that might have helped for some women, and it might have, their sexual appetite might have increased because they're thinking, of course you're interested in sex, but you don't get the release that came, therefore you don't get the relief of the symptoms that they were saying was hysteria. Another idea also was to say to the women that they should go horseback riding, which was really only manageable for the upper class women, which is really the only people that the doctors were seeing and really talking to about this issue. And I'm not saying it wasn't a middle or lower class issue too, but the opinions of the upper class women is, I'm sure, what was heard from doctors. So they were saying, go ride horses, which in some cases the movement and the rhythmic sensations would be enough for a woman to have a clitoral orgasm, but not necessarily. And at a certain point, women riding horseback that wasn't side saddle wasn't very decent. That's why they came up with side saddle, which, if you've ever seen it, it's a hilarious looking, stupid way to ride a horse. How do you even stay on the horse? I don't know. the women sit sideways, like kind of turned, twisting their front, like, twisting to the front, but both legs are on one side, and the reason that happened was so that women wouldn't ride around the yard having orgasms on their horses, if women even really could do that back then. Some could, some couldn't. So, at a certain point, masturbation was not decent anymore, and the acknowledgement of having those sexual desires or frustrations from women was not decent. Now, during this whole time period, it was always okay for men to be sexually charged and have a sexual appetite. But the public ideas and the societal ideas about what women are allowed to want and have changed. So, in the beginning of this hysteria epidemic, before the official vibrator was ever created in 1880, women would come in and say, I am having these, symptoms. Things are bothering me. And so the prescription for that would be midwives or doctors would literally get some massage oil, and they would go to town on her crotch. I've read a couple different accounts of exactly how they would do that, but I mean, it is a straight up hand job. Like they would put a few fingers inside of her vagina, and then like the heel of their palm might rest on their like pubic mound, kind of near their labia and their clitoris, and they would massage that way. And now here's the thing, though, they weren't calling these orgasms at all, even though I don't know why you wouldn't think that. But I suppose it was that women didn't have sexual desire still, so they can't have orgasms, which is a sexual thing, a sexual release. So they called them something else, which I don't even know if I can pronounce. It's such a strange word. It looks like paroxysms. It's Paroxysms. Paroxysms is what they would call them. So paroxysms equal orgasms. But they would go home feeling better. They're feeling less stressed and relieved. It's because their sexual frustration was taken out. So there's a fantastically long, hilarious history of orgasms, but especially the vibrator in the world. And there's a couple really great films about this. I remember in college, in one of my women's and gender studies classes, I saw a really fantastic documentary. I'm going to have to look up what the name of that was and try to remember. I tried to find it the other day, and I couldn't find the name, so I'm going to have to look at it again and see if I can find it. But it was a documentary about the history of the vibrator. And then there's also a more recent, based in reality film about the inventor of the vibrator that's called Hysteria. And I would recommend watching any of those. They're pretty fun to watch. And it just doesn't seem like a real story, but it really is. It's so funny. So I suppose the first dildo vibrator never would have been invented if doctors' hands weren't worn out from, giving hand jobs to women nonstop. And that was the big complaint, is the doctors would say, my hands are super fatigued, my fingers are super fatigued, citing also because oftentimes it took a good bit of time to get these women to have their paroxysms, which is a fantastic parallel to the real world now. I mean, if you're going to give your female partner a hand job, it might take a while, just like oral sex. It might take a while, and you have to be committed to be there for it. Or there might be no release, no paroxysm, or no orgasm. So doctors were complaining about sore hands, sore fingers from all of this paroxysm releasing activities they were doing, and they were doing a lot of it. It was a big thing. It was acceptable for women to say, I've got a doctor's appointment, I'm going in to do this, because it was a medical intervention at the time. It wasn't sketchy or immoral. It was a medical intervention. It was acceptable. And so women would sign up and do that. And this, of course, is, I'm sure, middle class and upper class women again. There's no poor women able to go see the doctor. So their hands were sore. And so in 1880, a male doctor, invented the first dildo. It was an electric, a really pretty large device. Electric device, and the first few inventions of the dildo were a little bit potentially dangerous. Some of them were a little strange, but eventually it became more perfected. And if you glance at magazines from the 20th century, like the early 20th century and on, there are ads in magazines advertising the smaller versions, of the first dildo, as personal massagers. But some of the language they use is so hilarious. I mean, you can tell, as a modern woman looking back, you're like, that is totally a vibrator, like a dildo vibrator. But it was still, at that point, hey, this is your personal massager. Use it to massage your back. And of course, they never show the women in the ads like massaging their crotch. They show them massaging their shoulders or their back or their legs, But I mean, come on, you were using it for your crotch if you were getting it back then. So we've come a long way in vibrator land. Now we have huge vibrators, tiny vibrators attached to strings, vibrators that are just one rod-shaped item. We have vibrators shaped like bunnies, shaped like dicks, that are black and bright red and pink and sparkly. And we have vibrators that are meant to just be, something that goes inside of you. We have vibrators that are meant to be inside of you and touch your clitoris at the same time. Waterproof ones. We have such a variety of vibrators. I mean, it's become so much more acceptable now to have a vibrator. I read something that at least 1/3 of women in the U.S. own at least one. And I mean, it could be more. I don't know. To me, at least the women I usually speak with, it seems like it's more than 1/3. But the group I'm with might not be an accurate representation of all the women in the U.S. If you have thoughts about this, that's something I would love to hear from you about. Well, if you have a vibrator and what kind you have. So it's so much more acceptable now to have a vibrator and to talk about it, and it's okay. Like, you can buy vibrators in Walgreens. I stumbled upon this the other day. I was like, what? Which is fantastic, but also surprising. I just didn't know that. So, and even before I chose my first vibrator, which was, I suppose, right out of high school. It was right out of high school, or maybe like a half a year out of high school, and it was in relationship to having my first sexual experience with my first sexual partner, and how I've mentioned in previous podcasts how I was really upfront about what I wanted and deserved sexually, which was orgasms. And so we went to a store and got a vibrator, which it never worked for me because I didn't know what kind to pick back then. It was not the kind that really worked, and I'll explain that in a minute. But it felt good. It was like, oh, interesting. And it was nice to explore that world of something other than just hands and things like that, because I was just curious, do these things work? I hear so much about them. I think now they're so much more fantastic than they used to be, definitely. But even before I got my first vibrator, I remember in high school talking to some of my friends and talking to them about, becoming sexual, or not necessarily having sex yet, but being turned on by things. And my best friend discovered how the pulsing shower head in the shower was the best thing ever. And she's more prone to have clitoral orgasms anyway, which is how she enjoys sex more. And so that was perfect for her, using the shower head. And I've since tried that, and it's wonderful, but I've never actually been able to orgasm from it. And I think I give up too fast just because it's not so much my thing. But from an early time in high school, freshman year, sophomore year, she was raving about the pulsing shower head. And this isn't, a vibrator, a penetrating vibrator or anything, but that would count as a sort of vibrator or a sort of sex toy. She figured it out, and she knew how to use it. I've also had friends in high school. I remember discussing, I don't know if this was a friend. I think it was just someone, maybe I heard it through the grapevine, the way high school is. But I remember that some girl that I either knew somewhat or heard about had, she told her friend that she had put a part of a glove, a latex glove, on a condom and tried to use that. And I don't know how not on a condom, sorry, on a banana. And tried to use that. I don't know how successful that was. Probably not very successful. But, women, if given the feelings that they're allowed to explore themselves sexually in that way, like what a vibrator allows you to do, or allows you to do in a partnership situation, women, if they feel like they can do it, they'll do it. Come on, using a banana and a glove? or the shower head. I mean, and there's far more interesting things that I know women have done for sexual pleasure, either in their older age or when they're just first learning what to do with their bodies. So, totally normal for you to be interested in a vibrator or in some sort of extra sex toy. Because also, let's face it, if you're learning how to have orgasms with yourself, it's going to be a really great key. It's going to be, or could be, a really helpful thing, because if you're masturbating every day, you're trying to figure out how to have orgasms yourself, your arm is probably tired, just like those doctors back in the 1800s. And you might need a break. So let modern science help you. Modern science being the scientists and doctors who chose to create the dildo in the 1800s. So, reminder of our topic today, it is, you are not the vibrator you choose. And this is just for me to say to you that whatever vibrator you determine works best for your body, you should choose that one. You shouldn't choose the one that they've made flashy and like fancy looking and it like, oh, it should work because it's got 8 parts to it. You should choose the one that is the tried and true method for you. So, for example, the first vibrator that I ever picked, I had no idea what I should have been choosing. It was this like humongous 9-inch, 10-inch long, with like solid hard plastic, completely inflexible, which was really not what I needed. Completely inflexible, completely dick shaped, like realistically wiener shaped with veins and everything. Wiener that was completely black. So it was my huge black vibrator. And it never did anything valuable for me. I mean, it was nice that it would vibrate, but I found it to be much more compelling to use when I just had it outside of my body on my clitoris. But as soon as I would try to put it inside of me, it was like, good Lord, this thing is like a rock. It's like rock hard, not appealing, totally not appealing. And also too big, I would say. But I don't know if I knew that at the time. So that definitely was not what I needed. But I thought, hey, I should pick a vibrator that looks like a penis, right? That would help. I mean, my partner and I at the time, neither of us had any clue what we should do with vibrators. I should have spoken with someone, but I don't think I had any friends that had any vibrators at the time, honestly. So that was the first one I chose, and that was not right for me. And I kept that for years and years, and I thought maybe one day it'll like be the right thing for me, and it just never was. And so finally, when I got my next one, which is similar to the, those bullet ones, that isn't the brand, it isn't a bullet, but those bullet ones that are like a battery pack attached to like a waterproof cord, and then like a little silver or little whatever colored like bullet, almost like the size of a lipstick container but more round. That was my second one, and that one is the one that actually works for me because it has 2 settings, it has 2 speeds, which is a valuable thing. I would always look for a vibrator with multiple speeds. And it wasn't intimidating at first. Like that other humongous penis-shaped vibrator that was rock hard was kind of intimidating because I thought, I'm supposed to like this, I suppose, right? Because in real life, I have sex with men, and their penises look like this. But this is why I'm saying you are not the vibrator you choose. Do not be fooled by design. Well, do be fooled by design. It depends on what the design is. But do not be fooled by the aesthetics of the design. The design needs to be a functional thing before it is a sex object in itself. I mean, if it's shaped like a shoe and it works the best, you pick that one. If it's shaped like those really weird bunnies, I've never tried those. I'm sure they're fantastic. I've heard good things about them. The ones that go inside of you while also stimulating your clitoris or something. But it's shaped like a bunny, which is weird, I would be inclined not to pick that because of that. But if that's what works for you, get it. It doesn't matter if it is like bright green or sparkly pink or humongous penis that's shaped, like a penis that's really rock hard. If that's your thing, do it. But I really very much doubt that is. One reason why those bullet vibrators are so much, more popular than they would now is because they have the ability to be maneuvered easily. I like the idea that they're waterproof. That's super helpful, so you can do them in different situations. And, of course, they should be waterproof because, let's face it, sex is always going to be a liquidy experience. And if it's not, then you're not turned on. In most cases, not always. But still, you should lube that up or you're going to get a little worn out. So it's definitely something for you to think about when you're picking a vibrator. Make sure that you're choosing one that you've spoken to people about, or maybe that you've read reviews about, or that at least you've done the research on the design of the product to figure out what's best for you. So the really great thing, like I was saying about mine, is that it's going to be really good for a woman who likes to have vaginal orgasms, but also likes to have clitoral orgasms. And of course, vibrators are always better for clitoral orgasms because it's just easier to maneuver and stuff. But I've been able to have both sorts of orgasms with mine. And I don't use it that often anymore just because it enhances my sexual experience with Jason some. But Jason and I are pretty good at having orgasms together at the same time or in the same sexual experience. And so I don't usually feel inclined to do a second one with the vibrator. But every now and again, we'll do it for fun. Or if I'm especially frustrated and really want to have an orgasm and somehow wasn't able to this time, then I'll use it. But I've been able to have orgasms from the one that I have that's like a bullet, in both ways. The clitoral one, obviously, with contact on the clitoris, and in that region. And then vaginal ones by putting the little silver bullet thing inside of me, because the cord, can go in, and then kind of pressing up against things like a pillow or something like that. Now, that was like my first experiment with it, because I never, at that point, had even had clitoral orgasms, and imagined that I could have them. So I was just going straight for the vaginal orgasms, and it worked, but it was a little bit harder than doing the clitoral orgasms. And you, of course, had to do a lot more moving around, and the cord, could get a little bit tangled and stuff like that. But it was still never a really big issue. It was never as much of an issue as I thought. Like, this cord, what if it gets, tangled or, whatever. So, when you're thinking about getting an orgasm or you're looking into getting your next one, make sure that you know what it is that you like the most so that you can get a vibrator that fits you. So if I was purchasing my first one now, I would so never get that first hard plastic penis-shaped one that I got when I was younger, because that is not going to hit the spots that it needs to hit. So make sure you look into that. And please do not be daunted by the different types of vibrators that there are, because there are a lot, and they all also look kind of comparable, so you're not really sure. So just think about what it is that you and your body are going to want from a vibrator. Check out that section, or just scan all the vibrators and continue looking and see, okay, that's clearly not going to be good for my body. Let me think about this. Because a lot of people, if you're not ordering them online, you feel awkward going into a sex shop sometimes and actually shopping for vibrators, like holding them and looking at them. But you need to do that, or you're going to get something that isn't going to work for you, like the huge, hard plastic penis I bought when I was 18. So get something that's good for you. And also, if you're buying it with a partner, get something that your partner's going to feel comfortable using. Like, I also know that my first partner never felt comfortable using that other vibrator with me. I would use it on myself and he would kind of be there. Because it's shaped like a huge penis. It's kind of like, oh man, this is a little bit intimidating. As my first sexual situation, with my first sexual partner, I'm using a huge black, hard plastic, 10-inch long penis, and it just doesn't seem like it's part of me, because it's not. So think about that too. Pick something, if you're with a partner that you know you want to be with, and that you're going to enter this vibrator using session as a team. Pick something that he or she is going to be comfortable using too, and pick something that works for you. Do not be scared to shop around. Do not be scared to get something that is a weird color or a weird shape, as long as you can tell that it's going to hit some good spots. And if it isn't good for you, it's okay to say, I want a different one. I'm pretty sure that they don't let you return vibrators to stores, but it's okay to go and buy a second one and think about what did and didn't work with the first one and how this next one is going to be better for you. It's all about experimentation. It's all about knowing what your body wants, and it's all about asking for what you want. So keep that in mind. Thanks for talking with me today. I had a great time. I'm Emma from the O Woman Podcast. If you have any comments or any questions or any ideas for topics that you'd like to hear on the show, you can email me at emma@owomanpodcast.com. So no exclamation point, obviously, after the O Woman in that email address. Just owomanpodcast.com. I can't wait to hear from you, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.